Record. There we go. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much. We have over 20 people. We have 25 people on the call this morning. Thank you so much for joining. These series meetings have been very informational. I think it's going to benefit anyone that joins, no matter what agency you're with. My name is TV Lee. I am the Special Initiatives Manager with the Homeless Leadership Alliance. And today, Pinellas County will be doing the presentation, but I did want to share a couple of things we have coming up in the CoC. And the first one is going to be that CoC information session. That is on June 9th, 5:30, I believe. And I can include the link for registration in the chat. So if anyone's interested in that, please register and plan to attend. And then we also have something tomorrow. It is the grant lab. So I can include the information on that as well. That's going to be at 1 p.m. So I'll put both of those links in the chat. If anyone's interested or has any questions, you can let me know or reach out to anyone at HLA and we'll get some answers for you. And we just got one more coming in. Okay. That is all we had. I just want to confirm, Alex or Sherry. I'm just looking at your screens. That's all? We're good? Okay. Oh, there's Shawnee's. I'm gonna admit another. And we will go ahead and have Jessica with Pinellas County started off. Thank you so much.
Yeah, all right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for hopping on. Welcome to, I guess, our session 2 of our hurricane season homeless provider disaster conversations is probably the best way to define it. I'm excited to be with you this morning, and we'll just kind of get started as long as my technology cooperates. There we go. So introductions. If we haven't interacted before, my name is Jessica Geib. I'm with Pinellas County Human Services. I am our department emergency manager. So I have a pretty unique role in that I spend half of my time working in the human services department with all of our partners across the board, like all of you all. I'm sure many of us have interacted during response season. So helping our partners prepare and then plug us into response and recovery when we do seek disaster, I guess. And then I spend half of my time over in the emergency management department working with our emergency management, preparing things like sheltering, feeding, our mass care services that really focus on response and recovery too. So happy to be here this morning. With that, I'm going to have each of my panelists introduce themselves. So we'll start with Anastasia. Anastasia, if you are sharing, we can't hear you.
No, sorry. Hi,
There we go.
Anastasia Sarioglu. I'm the Disaster Recovery Compliance Manager for the People First Hurricane Recovery Program, Pinellas Recovers.
Okay, excellent. Aubrey?
Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm not on
Nope, Aubrey, I think we've
technical
lost you.
difficulties this morning, but I'm Aubrey Phillips. I'm the City of St. Peter. Oh, can you hear me?
We have you now. Yep. Good morning.
All right, I'm going to give this one more shot.
All right, we can hear you.
Excellent. I'm the City of St. Petersburg's Director of Strategic Initiatives and Grants. I lead up citywide grants administration and also coordinate with our departments on implementation of Sunrise St. Pete, which is the City of St. Petersburg's disaster recovery programs.
Excellent. Thank you. And Jason?
Morning. Thank you. My name is Jason Susella. My day job is I am the managing attorney of Bay Area Legal Services Disaster Relief Team. I'm also here representing Pinellas VOAD and the long-term recovery group covering Pinellas County and Hillsborough County Thank you.
Great. And Dominique, I didn't know if you wanted to introduce yourself. I'm sure everyone's familiar with you.
Hi, everyone. Dominic Randall, Pinellas County Human Services. I'm the one who tried to put this training series together. I'm glad you guys were able to join us, and we will have one more closer to the start of kickoff season. So glad you guys are here. Thanks.
Okay, great. So again, we're glad you're all here. Just sort of a agenda roadmap for where we're headed this morning. We're going to talk a little bit about immediate disaster recovery. And I know we've all kind of lived it here in Pinellas. And so a lot of this may be review. but we'll get into what that specifically looks like still in our community. We'll talk through Pinellas Recovers program and what options are available out there for clients and also for our nonprofit community that's coming up. We'll hear from St. Pete as they share about their program as well. And then Jason will share a little bit about Bay Area Legal Services, who really are a critical partner in our disaster recovery specifically, and kind of the longer term where we're at now, right? 2 years past storm. And then at the end, we'll open it up for questions. So we'll kind of just dive right into immediate disaster recovery. I certainly don't need to, hit this too hard, but you all know recovery certainly is a very long process. And when we're reflecting on the 24 season, we're somewhere in the middle of that green area that you see here. I think the I guess misconception is that recovery should be quicker, right? When we think about disasters, we think about response, and we have these timelines, and we know where we're at 24 hours in, we know where we're at 48 hours in, and we can kind of hit those check marks. But what really happens with recovery is it gets pretty messy because programs look different with every storm, resources look different with every storm, and honestly, the timeline is different for every person or every community, every nonprofit that's impacted. And so that's why recovery really can be challenging. We're kind of past that honeymoon phase in Pinellas, and people are starting to really determine, what does recovery look like? It may, the perception may be that, I'm going to fully recover to what I was like before, knowing that at this point, recovery may look different. It may be a new normal for many people and programs in our community. So I just really wanted to paint the picture of sort of the timeline of programs. Again, I said disasters look different, every disaster. And that's the reality, is that not all programs turn on after every disaster. Not all community partners have the same resource pockets after disaster. And so I think that's where the challenge is how do we, or what is our role as providers in the community in helping our own clients recover, helping ourselves recover, and helping our organizations recover, especially when it's not set in stone like we're used to. And so today will be just sort of a very high level conversation about where we're at in recovery specific to the 24 season. And I just want to kind of preface this, that while we're talking about Helene and Milton recovery specifically, some of these programs may look similar if and when we're hit again in the future. And so certainly I don't want you to walk away and say, oh, this is what recovery looks like every time. Now I understand it better. But I think the conversation is more of, here are options out of a menu of recovery resources that may or may not come on. What could this look like for my organization? Or better yet, where do we plug into the process of recovery if some of these programs are turned on? So again, quick review of the 24 season. Many of us lived it, but just some of the high level impacts. I think the numbers speak for themselves when we look at damages to our community. Certainly we haven't seen impacts like that in any of our lifetimes. And just to kind of, again, hit this home, right? Helene was 100 miles off of our coastline, and we still experienced such significant impacts. And so I just want to kind of put this out there that we really did have a best case scenario, even in the worst case scenario for us. If we had seen that storm closer, we certainly would have seen much more catastrophic damage, believe that or not. And then the same with Milton, right? Only 25 miles south of our community. If we had seen just a slight wiggle a little bit further north, we certainly would have seen even higher storm surge than we saw with Helene. So certainly best worst case scenario again. Individual assistance, and I say individual assistance, in our space, we typically think of the FEMA programs that come online, but really for the sake of today's conversation, individual assistance really is any kind of program that assists individuals in our community. I think the biggest challenge, at least for the conversation with this group this morning, is that we often don't see a lot of programs that benefit our unhoused residents. And I think that's the challenge. So a lot of these programs, again, there are some qualifying factors that may not may not apply to each of the folks that you serve. One that's a conversation, that I know is continuing to happen on a state and federal level is how do we make sure we're serving all of those impacted by disaster. But I certainly don't want to not also discuss the fact that many of those folks that are impacted may not consider themselves unhoused, right? Things such as precarious housing, couch surfing, living in cars. All of those are also qualifying factors that may or may not qualify them for specific programs. So that's the challenging part. The qualifications are not the same across the board. And so I think the more we can just understand, again, what the menu of options are that could be online for each disaster, the better we can connect folks with appropriate programs. This is just a high level, again, menu of programs that FEMA may or may not turn on for each disaster. These need to be requested through the state, and then FEMA makes the deterrent if they will be turned on or not. I want to also preface all of this by saying FEMA is in flux right now. I'm sure you've all seen that. And so we really don't know what any of these programs may look like in the future. At a higher level, we've had conversations about what might this look like in our communities if some of these programs are turned on or not turned on, or if some of the qualifying factors change in these programs. So again, things that we've experienced in the 24 season, many of these programs were turned on, and some of these programs are still in operation today. The SBA loan program, again, not sure what that might look like in the future, but that's also another option for folks as they navigate their disaster recovery. And then the nonprofit partners bucket, just a couple of partners that were very active in Pinellas following the 24 season. Red Cross actually had some money that they were able to distribute to individual families. And again, I believe they had 2 cycles of that. So another kind of bucket of resource that we can use to connect our community to. And then another partner that I really would like to highlight, Capacity Path, who are local to Pinellas, although they do have a nationwide reach. Capacity Path really played an integral piece in our community by not providing necessarily monetary individual assistance, but more of that behavioral health assistance really throughout the community. So that included programs both for residents, but also for staff, not just county staff, but staff across the board that have been responding and working towards recovery. They're still in community providing services for those folks as we gear up for the next hurricane season. So I just wanted to put their name out there as they are a resource available. And then as my panel discusses what their programs look like this morning, what I hope that we all kind of put in the back of our head is, what does this look like for me, right? What is the role that my organization plays in disaster recovery? What are the things that you all need to be considering now before, if and when we're impacted again, and how you can plug into the system of recovery and how you can best benefit both your organization, your staff, and your clients. So I'm going to pass it over to Jason to share about the Pinellas VOAD.
Thank you, Jessica. So I'm going to discuss a few organizations here. We're going to start with Pinellas VOAD. Some of these organizations I'll be discussing have direct routes of assistance applications. Some do not, but they're very important to discuss. They're operating in the background, and it would be helpful to understand their place in disaster recovery here. So in Florida, we have the benefit of having a very disaster-prone state. What that results in is many of these organizations of non-governmental disaster relief organizations coming together to try to network to effectively collaborate on disaster response efforts. Many states have just a statewide VOAD, and Florida certainly has a statewide VOAD. And again, by the way, VOAD stands for Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster. But in Florida, we get a bit more granular and have many local VOADs, regional VOADs, etc. So in Pinellas County, there is a county-specific VOAD. These basically are entities where these non-governmental organizations come together to coordinate. And again, their focuses are on what they call the 4 Cs, which is a national standard of cooperation, communication, coordination, and collaboration. The VOAD is made up of a number of different partner groups, including nonprofits, faith-based groups, and community organizations. So many of them you're familiar with already, such as the big players, such as, let's say, Red Cross and Salvation Army. But there are many more local partners too that contribute to VOAD operations. Um, so the VOAD's basic purpose is to have these partners come together to basically discuss their resources, to share information, updates, and both be part of preparedness in for a next potential incident, but also to be very active in response. This gives us a central point to communicate with the county so that when we have a disaster incident, VOAD partners are in direct communication with the county to know where needs are in the community. So the VOAD is active year round. Uh, During disasters, of course, they are very active in our local Pinellas VOAD is very active in communicating with the county and coordinating on resource distribution. But in blue skies periods such as now, we meet monthly. So these groups meet typically in the Pinellas Emergency Operations Center in person, where we again go through a typical agenda to discuss updates for organizations. We have the county present so that we can have direct information from the county regarding their emergency management focus. And this kind of gives us a point to better organize our resources so that the next time that we do have a disaster incident, we are ready to respond in an effective manner with all these different groups. There is not a direct way to necessarily apply for assistance from these groups in a VOAD. Again, the VOAD is really an opportunity for these groups to coordinate better together. But of course, like I said, these partner organizations such as Red Cross and Salvation Army have their own individual programs that, which is, where they provide their own intake and their own ways to apply. So the VOAD is mostly working in the background to make sure that these, we are better prepared again and to respond to incidents. But it's a good opportunity if you have availability to join the VOAD, to come to the monthly membership meetings where you can get updates from the county on their, again, emergency management operations, and also from partner organizations that you may be able to connect with directly in that room. There's a virtual option too. So one thing I'll note is if you do want to join the VOAD and start attending monthly meetings, you can email me, and we'll go ahead and put you on the contact list, and you'll be notified of future events moving forward. I'll put my email address in the chat, and that's Pinellas VOAD. Are there any questions?
Jason,
Oh,
if I could just really quickly add, there were a couple of organizations in our community that had experienced damage following the 24 season, had reached out through the VOAD, right? Not necessarily active members at the time, for specific assistance. And I'm thinking of one I just did a site visit of. They lost their fence. We were able to connect them with partners within the VOAD who were looking for service opportunities, volunteer opportunities. So I would say that's also the power in the VOAD, is that when we do have these unmet needs in our community, specifically right after a disaster, we're able to match up organizations that perform those specific works, repairs, right, muck and gut, etc., and connect them with other nonprofits who provide those critical services. So certainly, again, another benefit of plugging into that network is just the connectivity to services.
it's a very good point, Jessica. Yeah, so though there is no formal application method to get assistance from the VOAD, being part of the VOAD can link you up with those resources to be able to assist more or less in an ad hoc situation. But all the partners in the VOAD are very well aware of assisting folks and survivors. So this is a great opportunity to get connected with just a variety of resources related to disaster relief.
Right.
Oh, it's me again. Okay. So in the sort of disaster response continuum, once we are winding down from response and we're getting into intermediate phases and eventually a long-term recovery, traditionally in our communities, a long-term recovery group will form. Purpose of the long-term recovery group is to really fill the gaps for folks who are struggling with long-term recovery that other organizations are unable to do so. So in the general response and intermediate phases, we've got folks applying for FEMA, SBA assistance, Red Cross assistance, Salvation Army assistance, et cetera, et cetera. There are these situations often where people are unable to fully recover after these applications and stuff. So people are still left in limbo, still looking for resources. And in our area in long-term recovery, we do have disaster case management as an option for people to seek further resources and trying to meet those resource needs. Um, so our long-term recovery group right now, which is covering two counties, again, that's Pinellas and Hillsborough. The full term is Pinellas and Hillsborough Unite in Recovery, is basically a fail-safe resource for people who are still struggling with recovery hurdles. They work very closely with our disaster case managers in providing a last stop for funding particular cases. So if people are struggling with recovery, we are traditionally referring them to the disaster case managers. That would be endeavors. And I have a phone number here too, in case you do encounter any folks who need to apply for their assistance. Um, they are assigned case managers. Case managers work to find long-term recovery resources in the community to meet the unmet needs of that particular survivor. There are instances where, for all the efforts of the case manager, there are no resources available to meet particular needs of survivors. So the long-term recovery group, what they traditionally do and what they're doing here in this area is they've set up an unmet needs table, which is basically that they have secured funding to fill those gaps where case managers have been unable otherwise to resolve or fill the resource gap that somebody has in long-term recovery. And this is an active thing going on right now. So survivors don't traditionally apply to an unmet needs table directly. They go through that route of applying to the disaster case manager in the area, have a case worked up. Case manager works on that case, determines that there are no available resources to satisfy the unmet needs of that particular survivor. And then that case manager contacts the long-term recovery group to bring up to present a case at the unmet needs committee. And at the unmet needs committee, that committee can decide that this survivor has, unmet needs that can be supported by funding and can directly fund that case. The long-term recovery group also works with other funding partners, such as Red Cross, to be present at those tables to contribute additional funds to these unmet needs cases coming in. So the long-term recovery group, again, is not really a place for survivors to apply directly, but they work in there to provide that last bit of that last resort funding in case survivors cannot get the resources they need elsewhere in long-term recovery. Now, the long-term recovery group will be operational still for a long time. Well, somewhat long time. Again, it just depends on funding at it as it is. We're looking into next year, at least at this point. Additional funding may come in to support those efforts because, again, 2024 season was truly pretty impactful. So there's a long road ahead of us with regard to these folks who are still struggling with recovery along the way. And that's it for long-term recovery, unless there are any questions.
Right, yeah. And I just wanted to add the DCMP program, the Federal Disaster Case Management Program, is another one of those menu option programs, right? We won't see DCMP necessarily turn on for every event. Bigger events, the state applies for those programs, and that's how it's turned on. So the other benefit I would just add of the long-term recovery group, and this is what they're working on, being able to sustain themselves for those smaller events that we see in community, right? We think back to the tornadoes that we saw earlier this year. There's no FEMA coming in. There's no federal, declaration. There's no really big resources that come in to support that. It's all a local response. And so the hope is that this group can continue to build and sustain itself so that when we do see those smaller events that are more localized, they're able to step in and assist folks that have unmet needs following those. Okay. All right, great. Thanks, Jason. All right, we're going to move over to Pinellas Recovers program.
Hello, Anastasia Sterioglu with Pinellas Recovers. CDBG-DR is funding of last resort. We're usually the tail end. They come in after FEMA, SBA, insurance. Next slide. The funding requirements for CDBG-DR is we typically have 6 years to use all of our funding. We can get an extension, and typically with the larger grants we do, it is reimbursement based, which means Pinellas County spends the funds and then we get reimbursed by HUD. There's a 15% set aside for mitigation activities. We must meet a HUD national objective. At least 70% needs to go to our most vulnerable low to moderate income clientele. That must be tied to a qualifying disaster. And for the mitigation piece, it does not require a direct tieback, meaning it does not need to be tied to the disaster. Next slide. So these are the three HUD national objectives. The LMI, that's low income persons, that's typically the population that you're serving. For our infrastructure projects, at least 51% needs to be low to moderate income area, and that's based on the census information for that area that this project is serving. And then there's also those who are presumed to be low income, which is also typically your clientele, those who are homeless, those who are disabled, they would fall under LMC. And then we have urgent need, which is the serious, serious needs of the community. It's a life-threatening piece. And then the elimination of slum and blight, which we don't see often. Typically, when you see that, it's because a grantee did something wrong and HUD's kind of trying to give them a pass. Oh, there's a hand raised.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much. I just might be too specific for this group, but made me curious. It says can benefit all residents in the area if at least 51% of the residents are LMI. Would that be like if you were serving a specific, the Capri Mobile situation is the first thing that comes to my mind. Does that count as an area, or would an area be like
For
all of St. Pete?
Yeah, so for that's typically for infrastructure projects, and think of it like maybe a stormwater project. And this particular stormwater project is going to hit maybe three different census blocks. And when you do the calculation using, we have like this fancy map that we build out. When you do the area that is going to benefit, if it hits 51% or more, it automatically is considered the entire project low to moderate
Mm.
income project. So
Okay,
it's
so like
low to
every
moderate area.
that whole area that was expected to be affected by the stormwater project, and then 51% allows everyone that's going to be affected to fall in the group
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's say
Wow.
one of the blocks that we're using is a very well-known high income area, but there's
Mhm.
some surrounding ones that will also benefit that drive that percentage up, then that whole project is LMI.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
And if it's below that, it's considered urgent need. So we can still do it. We just have to justify that it's like, if we don't do this, there's a serious and immediate threat to health.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Next slide. So, Pinellas County, we are considered the People First Hurricane Recovery Program because we have put so much funding into our housing. Typically, what you'll see a lot of grantees do is they use the CDBG-DR program kind of like their slush fund because of deferred maintenance. So they didn't do their infrastructure projects, they kept delaying things, and then it got to the point where the public is outraged. They're saying, hey, this has been a problem for 20 years. And then they use these funds to kind of take care of that mess. We are polar opposite. We are housing first. We are looking at how do we get people back into decent, safe, and sanitary. The infrastructure projects have to wait. So we have the largest bucket in our housing. Next slide. Okay, so, and then this is kind of a breakdown of each of the programs. We have the homeowner rehab reconstruction, reimbursement, local landlord program, homebuyers assistance. The disaster relief reimbursement is technically a public service, but it is, I'll talk about it more. It's a reimbursement for rent, utilities, mortgage. So we kind of throw it into housing. And then strategic relocation, and revitalization program. So in total, it's over $630 million of a $813 million allocation. Even other like grantees like Lee County who had way more funding, they are roughly at like 65% of their allocation going to housing, while we're over 75%. So it really is a drastic difference of our focus is the people. Next slide. So our homeowner rehab reconstruction program, this is to rehab, reconstruct, or in Pinellas County, we are a wind zone 3 area. which affects our mobile homes. There's a lot of mobile homes that are here before Hurricane that were built before Hurricane Andrew, and they're considered non-conforming structures. So this would allow us to either relocate them if we can't safely put them back where they are, or send them, give them a replacement unit that is newer, that meets the higher wind zone requirements. Um, Rehab and reconstruction, self-explanatory. We want to give them decent, safe, and sanitary living conditions. We'll go in, do a damage assessment, and we will correct anything, even if, let's say, there was some deferred maintenance issues, like the person is low income, they haven't been able to keep up, but there was some storm damage as well. We can clean up the entire issue. So we will fix all the deferred maintenance on top of fixing anything that was storm related. And that's the main living condition, the main living space. We can't like fix fences and garages and sheds, like anything like that, but it's really focused on that how the housing portion. And the great thing about our program is it goes up to 120% AMI. A lot of other grantees, what they'll do is they'll first start with the 80% and less, and then later we'll open it up if there's funding for that 80 to 120%. The problem with that is, though, is there's not a lot of assistance there for people who are between that 80 and 120. They're actually referred to often as the working poor. So by opening it up to everybody, we're really getting, those who are they're doing fine, but this is really going to put them into that struggle. And then those who are really low income. The other good thing is, let's say we had somebody who owned a mobile home and it was destroyed, and let's say they were paying lot rent and they no longer live there because they owned it at the time of the storm and it destroyed, they can still qualify under this program to get a replacement mobile home. And that's typically where we see most of our LMI. It is a 5-year forgivable loan. Every year it gets reduced 20% because they've maintained their primary residence there, and it goes up to 375,000. Next slide. Oh, so the impact of this program: reducing homelessness, decent, safe, and sanitary living conditions. We're taking care of the mold, the roof damage. Sometimes we'll see the roofs like peeling. So the roof was already in need of repair before the storm happened. Preserving housing stock. So instead of code enforcement going out to this house, hitting it with a code violation, they've all decided they're going to hold off. Anyone who's in this program, as long as they notify code enforcement, they're not going to get any violations. And then also just building the long-term community resilience. If it's a mobile home and they own the lot underneath them, we will give them a stick-built home. So we're just trying to increase the strength of what we give them. So it'll be a stronger product. And then again, if it's lot rent and it's mobile home to mobile home, the mobile homes that are designed today are a lot stronger than the ones built in 1996. Next slide. Then there's a homeowner reimbursement program. So many of the homeowners, they couldn't wait. They had to either pull from their 401k. They did whatever they had to repair the property and move back in, so we can get up to $50,000 of eligible code compliant repairs reimbursed. This again also goes up to 120% AMI, but the repairs have to be complete and the property needs to be livable. So for some applicants, they'll apply, and then if the housing is not decent, safe, and sanitary, they will get kicked into the rehab and reconstruction, and we will finish the work. Next slide. Again, so we want people, to have, financial stability. They can put this money back into their 401k. We have so many elderly in our community that really are living paycheck to paycheck, and having this taken out, is really scary for them. So having that, for their rainy day fund, has been really helpful. Next slide. The local landlord program, I really love this program. So it's very similar to the homeowner rehab and reconstruction program. The landlord has to have less than 5 units. So really looking at the small, not the really big landlords that have bought up half of Pinellas. It does not have to be a rental at the time of the storm. It could be, let's say, a seasonal resident, so this is their second home. We cannot help them under the rehab and reconstruction program for second homes, but they could agree for the next 5 years to turn this into affordable housing. So we would go in, we would rehab, or we can reconstruct, or if it's a mobile home, replace it. So they get the same benefits as the HRRP applicants, but for 5 years we get it as affordable renting for at the high home rent limits. And this is also a really good option if you've been working with landlords in the past that were giving you really good rates for your homeless population, $600, $700, $800. If they have a unit that was destroyed, send them our way and we can see if we can get that back into decent, safe, and sanitary living conditions and get someone moved in. And what I love about this program, because it's smaller scale, some of the issues that I've experienced in the past with multifamily affordable housing is the developers will promise you the world. They'll say, I'm going to give you 300 units. It's going to be 3 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. And then, you do all this work, you do your risk assessment, you do all this back end stuff, and you go to the board and they pick these projects. And then the developer uses that afterwards as an opportunity to negotiate down. And then they say, actually, we can't do 300 units. We're only going to do 150. And they're not going to be 3 bedrooms. They're going to be 1 bedrooms. And so then what you were promised is not what you get. And you end up wasting all this time and then going back to the board, and either it gets re-obligated, or if they've been in your board's ear sometimes with the politics, you'll still end up having to continue with this project. But then there's also the environmental piece. We have to do an environmental review on these, and an environmental review on a multifamily affordable housing project takes a lot longer than these projects. And then additionally, you got to go to the planning board. One of the issues then we have when it goes to planning is that all of the residents in the surrounding neighborhood will go to the board meetings and say, I don't want those kind of people in my neighborhood. And it becomes very political, and sometimes then it fails there, right? But we've already wasted time. With this, I can get an environmental review done very quickly. I can get the rehab and reconstruction done a lot faster. I guaranteed, like, if you had a 3 bedroom before, I'm going to give you a 3 bedroom after. So I can control the number of units I'm getting because I already know what it was before. So I can get people into affordable housing a lot quicker. It's a lot more, scattered, which is also a good thing because that's where people complain less if they don't know, right? I don't have to say, hey, by the way, your next door neighbor is agreed to do affordable housing. These people are protected federally under the PII Privacy Act. So it's just a lot smoother, and it's I'm more guaranteed to get affordable housing. So this is currently an underutilized program. We're working on doing more outreach so that landlords and also the seasonal residents know that this is still an option for them. Next slide. And I kind of already covered this, but again, preserving affordable rental housing. We're getting a lot more units. It's scattered. It's in pretty convenient locations, and then it's a win-win. I don't have to hit them with code compliance violations, and then they just sit there and become an eyesore. Next. Disaster relief reimbursement program. So us, and then you'll hear from Aubrey, us in St. Pete's are the first to do this program. This is brand new. It provides reimbursement this is really great for our renters, up to 6 months of their rent and utilities. At the high home rent, we standardized it because what'll happen is someone who is higher income, they can afford higher rent, so they were hitting the 15K a lot better or a lot sooner than someone who is very low income, who is renting the $500, $600, $700 housing. So if we did it based on receipt based, those who really needed it were getting less, and those who really didn't need it were getting the full 15K. So by using high home rent, it really standardized it, and everyone gets the same based on their household composition. So this has been a really great program for us. It comes with its challenges. We get, it's document heavy, but a lot of our applicants have used this to pay down their debt for the home buyer assistance program, which I'll talk about next, and then we're able to then purchase their first home. So next slide. So it's helped them pay off their debt. If they're past due on their rent, we are not punishing them for anything that's a balance. They can use this funding to get caught up. Next slide. It's really just financial stability. It's been great. Some of the small businesses as well, like they've used that to pay off some of their loans. So anybody who had like a t-shirt shop in their house and stuff like that. Homebuyer assistance up to $80,000. The great thing with CDBG-DR is it can pay 100% of a down payment. With regular CDBG, it can only pay 50%. So this has been great. We've seen a lot of young families utilize this program to buy their first house. Next slide. Again, so reducing that financial instability with rent. We saw like after COVID, rent prices went up high, and then anytime there's a disaster, rent prices go back up again. Like if you look at the United Way Alice report, if you track it, it's always fluctuating basically when we need it to be stable the most. So this has been really great for housing stability. Next slide. So we have 3 programs that potentially we will be launching later this year. They may be reduced, removed, or moved into housing, and that is our small business program. There's about 22 million in that. That is up to $500,000 in storm repairs, expanding facilities, and then the nonprofit program, which is again about 500,000 is the cap for storm repairs, expanding services and facilities, and that's $10 million. And then the last program that we have is the local mitigation infrastructure program. It is intended to be a match for some of those FEMA grants, like the hazard mitigation program. And that is $106 million to do like stormwater projects or whatever that community needs to be more resilient. I think that should be my last slide.
Great. Yeah. Do we have any questions for Anastasia this morning? All right. And as soon as decisions are made for specifically, I think for this group, the nonprofit funding program, we'll be sure that we get that pushed out to you all. So you can take that into consideration. All right. Thank you, Anastasia. We'll move over to Aubrey with Sunrise St. Pete.
Thanks so much. So the Sunrise St. Pete program is the city's implementation of the Community Development Block Grant for Disaster Recovery that Anastasia was just sharing, the Pinellas County program. So you'll see a lot of similarities. We've really worked closely with the county as both of the agencies were developing our action plans to sync up the programs where we could so that it's clear for residents what they can expect. So we can head on to the first slide. So a lot of this is, again, recapping from Anastasia's presentation, but just high level. Congress approves the CDBG-DR funding, and then it's allocated by HUD. HUD determines which disaster impacted communities receive funding directly and how much, as well as what storms qualify as disasters. As Anastasia was referencing, these funds are really dedicated to helping rebuild disaster impacted areas with a focus on low-income households and housing in particular. A minimum of 70% of the funds must assist low to moderate income individuals and families, and then all of the activities except for that 15% mitigation set aside that Anastasia mentioned have to have a clear link back to the specified storms. We can head on to the next slide. All right. So here is a recap in one slide of all of the different Sunrise St. Pete action plan programs. Our action plan is on our website, sunrisestpete.org. If you want more information about any of these, we have a number of programs that are currently in progress. Applications are currently open, just opened earlier this week for our affordable rental housing development program. And so that is putting $48 million towards development of new multifamily affordable housing. We currently are not intaking applications, but because we've reached full saturation of our caseload for residential recovery. We have a rehab program, a reimbursement for repairs program, and a disaster relief payments program. those, we're processing those applications now. Very similar to the programs that Anastasia was describing, where we can help with repairs or reconstruction or replacement of housing that was impacted by the qualifying disasters. We can reimburse homeowners for repairs that they've already completed. And then our disaster relief payment reimbursement program provides reimbursement for rent, mortgage, or utilities for qualifying households for up to 6 months. Each of those programs provides assistance up to 120% AMI, with priority given for those at lower incomes, as well as for the disaster relief reimbursement. There's priority for tenant households and those who still have repairs that are not completed. For the residential recovery and elevation, there are additional priority criteria related to household member status. There's age qualifications, veteran status, disability status will each increase the priority of that case. We also have about 25 million that we're directing to public infrastructure mitigation. That is helping support stormwater projects within the city of St. Petersburg. Those projects we're currently completing preliminary engineering reports on potential projects to inform project selection, with construction likely starting in 2027. And then we've also used some of the CDBG-DR program dollars to help inform post-disaster improvement and planning. So to develop a citywide after action report and long-term community recovery plan to really make sure that we're carrying forward those lessons learned from the 2023 and 2024 disasters. Coming up in the coming months, in summer 2026, we also will be rolling out a home buyer assistance program, a voluntary buyout and acquisition program. That's a voluntary program to purchase properties that are in particularly disaster-prone areas and return those properties to open space or floodplain management benefits, so that we're not only getting households out of harm's way, but we're improving the resiliency of those neighborhoods where those acquisitions take place. And then we also have coming up in summer of 2026, our nonprofit community support services program. This one is a little distinct, although the names are very similar between the city and the county. The city's program is really focused on providing support for service delivery, not helping with repairs and impacts that nonprofit agencies may have seen. So there will be funding that's directed towards food insecurity, mental health. So some of those support services that we really saw an impact and a need as a result of these storms. So we can head on to the next slide. And so just a recap of the two programs that we're currently processing applications for. On the left, you can see a heat map of our disaster relief reimbursement program applications. On the right is our residential recovery and elevation program. So you can get a sense of where those applicants are distributed throughout the city. We've got about 2,600 applications in total that we're currently processing. And then if you're interested in learning more about any of the programs that I've described, or getting signed up for updates, that is the best way to find out when new programs are launching, when application periods open, and other updates. You can go to sunrisestpete.org. Each of the programs has more information. The program guidelines, the action plan are all available there. If there's a particular program that you're interested in learning more about, that QR code will take you to our homepage where you can find the subscription link. And I think that brings us to the close.
Great. Thank you so much. Any questions? All right, we will move on to Jason, Bay Area Legal.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. I work again for Bay Area Legal Services. I'm the managing attorney of our disaster relief program. Bay Area Legal Services, first off, is a local provider of legal aid services. And just to be clear on what that means is that our services are entirely free. There is no exception to that. folks must be income eligible, but our services are always 100% free. That's not a contingency fee or a sliding scale or anything like that. We are funded by a number of different grants that give us opportunities to help folks from various demographics. So I often get the question about, well, what is your income eligibility specifically? That gets a bit into the weeds, and I don't want to discourage people from ever applying. I can generally say that we are going to be able to assist lower income individuals, but because we have many different funding sources, each funding source has a specific eligibility requirement tied to it. So Bay Area is made up of a number of different teams, for example. So we have a veterans team, we have a senior team, we have a housing team, we have a family law team, and of course, we have a disaster relief team. Each one of these teams may receive funding from different sorts of grants covering different sorts of demographics. So, again, if someone calls in who is a veteran, even if they have a disaster related legal issue, um, the income eligibility may be higher for a veteran than on my team, depending again on the particular applicant. So my point really on this is if you encounter any folks who may have a disaster related legal issue, don't fret about whether or not they're technically eligible. Just send them over to us. We have a statewide helpline, which I'll get to momentarily, where we have a whole set of screeners who know exactly all of our funding sources and can shunt people into the proper program to make sure that we can try to help them. So our services, by the way, are, like I said, entirely free, but they are only for civil legal assistance. So criminal issues we are unable to handle. We also don't handle things like fee generating cases such as slip and falls or, medical malpractice. That's not what legal aid's able to assist with. Um, like I mentioned, there are many teams in Bay Area. So beyond just my disaster team, we have a lot of others that serve in different areas. So we can cover a huge amount of different civil legal issues that crop up for folks. But specifically regarding the disaster team, we focus on assisting survivors with disaster related legal issues. You may ask, what's a disaster related legal issue? Well, it's really kind of anything that can be logically related to a disaster impact. We're not too picky as long as there's a good narrative. I put on here just some of the bigger ones we see, such as housing. Housing is very much the primary legal issue we see, uh, both in a blue sky period, but also immediate response and in long-term recovery. And just some examples of those items include people being evicted from their rentals following a storm improperly. Landlords were all very eager to throw people out of their homes. And evictions move very quickly in Florida. So it's very important to educate the community on their rights as renters, but also to know that our services exist so that folks who end up having a notice of non-payment or a notice to terminate their lease or something like that can be sent over to us right away for triage. FEMA appeals and assisting with FEMA applications is something we've done. Of course, that's not terrifically relevant right now since we're outside the financial assistance period. And of course, as Jessica mentioned, the landscape of FEMA is ever changing. So we'll see how that is in the future. I do believe it will be something moving forward that we'll be able to assist with as well. But of course, that's in flux. Insurance issues we're seeing popping up now, of course, where folks are still fighting with their insurance company, struggling with interpreting their policy and things like that. Contractors is a huge part of what we're moving into. There's sort of a legal subject matter continuum that evolves after you have a disaster impact. And we're getting into that long-term recovery portion where contractor issues are quite dominant. So we have issues again where folks are scammed out of their money and contractors who said they were contractors but are just scam artists. That's kind of over and done with. That is an issue that we really try to stress community education on avoiding those sorts of things because resolving those issues where someone shows up to your home after a disaster impact, says, "Oh yeah, we can put that new roof on in 3 days. Just give me $5,000. I'll be back with supplies." And the survivor, maybe in a traumatized state following a disaster, does not really get information from that individual. That individual leaves and then does not show up. there are limited things we can do as attorneys to really track down that person, to sue them, to get that money back. So community education is very important when it comes down to scam sorts of situations. Instead, what we're talking about now are those situations where contractors are maybe not completing the work as they said they would, the timeline is skewed, or maybe they haven't started anything at all. Or maybe they've completed the work at a substandard quality in the end. These are all issues that we're seeing coming in now, things that we may be able to help homeowners with. Mobile homes too really are the brunt of many issues following a disaster. Of course, they are communities that are generally significantly more impacted than traditional single family homes. There's a whole set of laws that apply to mobile homes, different from traditional homeowners or renters. It really depends on the circumstances of the situation. But folks, mobile homeowners struggling with various problems following a disaster is something we see a lot of too. Um, so beyond doing a lot of these legal items, this, like I said, is not a comprehensive list. This is just generally some of the bigger ones we see. But as long as the legal issue can relate to a disaster in some way or another, we're pretty good with fitting that in. And here's an example that's more of a niche item, but we have seen it before. Are family law issues where people come in and say, listen, they were separated parents, they had a joint child, there was a time sharing agreement in the court system, and one parent had to evacuate following a disaster. Well, the other parent may have gotten upset about that and filed something in the court to say, hey, this parent denied me my time sharing because they left the state without giving me proper notification. We see things like that pop up, and that can be a big item there too for, again, those folks. So, really, again, when it comes down to what services we provide or what is a disaster related legal issue, it's just the tie in, again, to a disaster impact one way or another. Beyond doing direct legal assistance for survivors, we do a lot of community outreach. Again, like I mentioned, community education is extremely important for things like making sure folks understand what they can do to protect themselves against, fake contractors, scam artists that show up after a disaster. We participate widely in the VOAD, like I mentioned, to trying to make sure people know that disaster legal services are a real thing and an important aspect of disaster recovery and response. Because legal aid, we've been here for a few years in the disaster relief community, but we certainly don't hold a candle to all the other folks who've been doing this a lot longer than us. So sometimes we just want to make sure that people know that we are here, we exist, and we are happy to help survivors as it is. One more thing, too. There are many legal aid programs in the state that all cover different territories. So Bay Area Legal Services, our direct service area is actually 5 counties. That's Pinellas, Pasco, Hillsborough, Manatee, and Sarasota. If people call in from those direct service counties, we can assist them with whatever they may need. Of course, assuming our resources are available. That is anything from advice and counsel all the way to representation. And on that note, we do all sorts of lengths of service, and sometimes people just need to call us, get a consultation, and we can advise them on their rights. And that may be enough in itself for people to get the information they need. But we can also, of course, go to court if we need to, depending on the situation. So here is the thing, though. Like I said, if people are calling in from outside of the county or in different areas, we have a statewide helpline. My firm runs a statewide helpline, so people from anywhere in the state can call in that number to apply for legal assistance. So here in Pinellas, I still say call that number. That's the best way that survivors should reach out to us to get legal assistance for their disaster-related legal issues. But otherwise, that's all I have for Bay Area Legal Services.
Right. Do we have any questions for Jason? All right. Thank you, Jason. All right, so just to close this out this morning, we really hope that you gathered some information of maybe a program you weren't familiar with. I'm sure maybe we all thought of a client or two that maybe could access some of these programs that we can help to connect with. We really just want to encourage you to start thinking about, how did your recovery go in the 24 season, and what are the things or the gaps that you can work towards filling for when we get impacted at the next storm? So, what do your operations look like? What kind of staffing challenges, facility issues, and services, right? What were the gaps in being able to get your services back online? And then also, what services were you able to offer or could you have offered in thinking about recovery for our community? And how can we plug those into the structures that are around? How do we connect your clients to some of the services, right? We saw a lot of support from some of our partners in being able to just help clients navigate FEMA assistance and applications. Incredibly complex. If you yourself were impacted, just even calling in the line sometimes was hours of waiting. And so how can you help support clients to do that, specifically those that may be not as technologically advanced? Advocacy for clients, right? Specifically in programs like Bay Area Legal, how can we help advocate for our clients to be able to access the programs that they might need? And then just from an emergency management perspective, the value that you all bring to us in the Emergency Operations Center is the information of what's happening on the ground, right? The whole kind of menu of programs that we keep referencing are only able to be turned on because we can tell the story of what the needs are in our community. So that information that you provide is so critical. And I just want to say, not only the data that comes in of, numbers impacted, we saw those significantly high numbers of structures damaged, but also the stories of clients that are impacted. We can also use that information to help advocate for more funding, more programs, and more opportunities for all of us to help recover. So with that, I have everyone's contact information here on the screen. I encourage you to reach out if you have specific questions or thoughts. And I, again, offer us Human Services as a resource. I know we meet with many of you throughout the year to talk about, how can we help resource you? How can we help you think through response and recovery? But certainly Dominique and I are always available to help have more conversations, pick our brains, help you think through things maybe that there are gaps for. I will turn it over back to TV. And again, thank you this morning for allowing us to come share the programs we have going on in community.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, everybody, for the presentation today. Lots of good information. And I just wanted to reiterate the information session and the grant meeting that is tomorrow. So the grant one is tomorrow and the information session is on June 9th. If anyone didn't get the link to that, you can reach out to me directly and I can send that back over. But that's it. I won't hold anyone too much longer. Thank you all so much for coming, and hopefully we'll see you on our third session. Have a good day.
Thank you.